Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host along with Marc Moorash, who has graciously joined me. And we have one of our best friends in all of TV land come back to visit us again, Al Robinson. Al is a local blogger. I'm going to let Al talk about what he does, but I'm going to make a plug for Election Day. Even if you don't like any of the four candidates, or two candidates as you were, that are running for president in this year's election, it's still important to show up and support folks down ticket in the down ticket races that are important. It's important to vote in those races too, because those are the folks that have a more direct influence on our day-to-day lives as citizens of Connecticut than the President of the United States does. So with that, I'm going to introduce Marc Moorash, let Marc mention what he's up to lately, and then we'll go to Al Robinson, and Al will, unless you want to go the opposite way?
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Start us off, because you have the breadth of the information of everyone local, and I think given the playing field will start us off in a good way.
Well, all right, look, as you said, that Election Day is coming up soon. We're less than 40 days away from the election, and it is quite important for everybody to come out and vote. There's a lot of people who are running for office besides Clinton and Trump, and it's important to come out and vote because I strongly believe, I'm not a big fan of the national scene. I'm more into local stuff, local issues, because the closer it is to your home, the more of an impact you can have on things that affect your neighborhood. So I'm talking about your state rep races, your state senate races, and then from there you go to your congressional races and your U.S. Senate races. And we have all those things are happening this year. As you know very well, in terms of the state rep and state senate, those races are run every 2 years. U.S. Congress is also the same time every 2 years. U.S. Senate is under a different time frame, but under this particular window, we have Richard Blumenthal, who is running for re-election against somebody who is rather local, soon to be former state representative from the 2nd District, Dan Carter. So you have a whole lot of races that are on top of very, very local things such as probate judge, and I think there might be some registered voters happening in some areas. But you have a lot of races that are happening right now that people should be aware of, as well as maybe referendums that are happening in the area. I think there's a couple of bond issues that are happening in Danbury, one pertaining to, one that has a connection to the Hartstone Castle, which I hope we'll have some opportunity to talk to at some point in time before Election Day. Because
if we can fit that in today, because that is an important issue.
I think it's a very important issue, and I think it's terrible how that particular issue is being, in my opinion, hijacked with the bond. But that'll take a whole half an hour to talk about. I know we just talk about local races here, but again, it's really important for people to come out and vote. Look, I understand how a lot of people are turned off by the Clinton and Trump nonsense and might not want to come out and vote. But just because you might not agree with what's going on at the top of the ticket, there might be some stuff down the trough that you might want to be interested in, especially when it pertains to your own neighborhood. And it's all up for grabs right now. And whether you are conservative or if you're progressive, especially when the local things, I try to weed out the partisanship when it comes down to neighborhood levels. People think I'm really like hardcore progressive or hardcore liberal, and they don't really take the time to read what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to Danbury. It's not that I'm like a real hardcore progressive when it comes to Danbury politics. It's just that the ruling faction in Danbury is so anti-immigrant that there's no way I can accept anything that they're talking about, because they're just, attacking a huge segment of our population for purposes surrounding race. And it's just disgusting and it's wrong. And that's why I'm really against that current ruling class, that's especially in the local area in Danbury. But you can talk to people in Bethel, bipartisan all the way in terms of talking to both candidates on the Republican side as well as the Democratic side. as well as in other areas. But it's really important for people to come out and vote, because these people make a lot of major decisions that affect your neighborhood, especially on the state level. If you're paying state taxes, you want to know how your taxes are being used in your area. Or if you're getting some money back from you're giving taxes up, your money up to Hartford, you want to make sure that you get at least some of that money back to help you out with some of the issues that are happening in your neighborhood.
And these are the folks that are more likely to answer you back if you reach out to them.
Absolutely.
Than people on a national level. But before we get back to that, Mark, tell us what you've been up to lately, other than moving.
You know what? I want to jump in. I like what you're saying, and it's funny because you've got a very positive take on it, and I look at it as, when you get to learn who's down at the lower level, you also get the opportunity to stop these folks from filtering up the line in the system to kind of pushing them out of politics. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks in Connecticut who would think, we could have stopped Daniel Malloy a long time ago before he got to the position he's at. So not only is it, who's going to help you locally, but how is it going to affect us down the line? It's so important to learn on both sides of the aisle, like you said. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to take me into the voting booth, and she'd say to me, "We vote this line." Now, I have no idea which line she was pointing to, because I was told, but I was like, that's really weird. Why do you just vote that line? And you come to a point, and we've talked about this in the last couple of weeks with something like TPP, if you feel that's a big issue, and it's being affected up at the representative level, you have Cope, who has said, I'm against it, and Esty, who has said, I'm not going to tell you what I am. And you look at it and go, at what point can you balance one way or another? Where you're feeding these people up to a national level in the bigger picture. It's kind of like we're down here talking about minor league baseball. And we need to, make sure that the people who are learning to hit, learning to catch, and learning to be conniving don't get into a position where they can affect more people.
Right. Well, there was actually, you're talking about your relative saying, I want to vote this line. There was a time in Connecticut where you had the big line where you just instead of clicking the old voting booth, you could click. You just click Democrat, like that.
The big
that's how crazy it was back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, there are a lot of situations where you don't want to look upon party line. You want to look at who is best representing your best interests in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
For instance, in the state rep races, I live in the 109th district.
Okay.
My representative is State Representative David Arconti. And I'm really, really homed in on issues that pertain to my district. Downtown Danbury is represented in the 110th district. And that's currently being, the state rep right now is Bob Godfrey. Mm-hmm. And his challenger is Emanuela Palmeras, who I actually had the opportunity to interview on this show alongside the managing editor of the News-Times on a different local access show. And that is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting races in Greater Danbury, and a situation where we have an individual who just became a U.S. citizen not long ago, who was an undocumented immigrant in this area for a very long time, but happens to be a Republican, versus a Democrat who many of his critics and a large segment of the immigrant population calls him an anti-immigrant because he votes almost consistently against anything that pertains to immigrants. The most biggest one was his opposition towards allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses so they don't have to drive around town without being able to get insurance. He voted against that, and he was very vocal against that. It was quoted in several periodicals about his opposition towards it. So that is a very interesting race. And again, you would think that the pro-immigrant person would be a Democrat, but that's not the case. But on the flip side, you would think that somebody who was an undocumented immigrant who lived through the atrocities of the local Republicans in this area, what they subjected immigrants through the years 2005 up to now, you would think that somebody who's an undocumented immigrant would not be a Republican, but she happens to be a Republican. So again, those dynamics, especially on the local level,
Yes.
you really have to look at the candidates and make sure they're representing your best interests and taking care of your neighborhood. Like, hey, I got this pothole over here. Why is this happening? Or why is my state road all messed up? Or well, why is my school having so many problems here? And make sure that they're taking care of your best interests and vote for the person who is best representing your interests in your neighborhood.
Would you agree that like the idea of a national Republican is very, very different than a local Republican?
Yes and no.
Yes, yeah, I would say yes and no. There's a lot of dynamics. There's a lot of insight nonsense that happens. You have these town committee knuckleheads, who I like to call them, who are just so hyper partisan that they just get in the way of everything.
Yes.
And you have your political wonks who are just as crazy, saying crazy things on social media or crazy things in the newspapers. You know who they are all the time.
Yes.
I look at I read the News Times. I'm like, I know who you are. You're an idiot. Why are you doing this? Come on. You have that nonsense, but the common Joe person, if you're a politician, you think about the common Joe person, the common person who just he has a husband and a wife and a kid. They both get up every day. They go to work. They come home. They make sure the kids' homework is done. They got dinner on the table and make sure to put the kids to bed. And they're just doing the best they can to provide for their family and give them a good upbringing. Those are the people you should care about. And those people don't look at the News Times. Those people are not really into the inside baseball politics and the stuff that's the hyper partisan nonsense. They just want to know that, hey, is my kid's school okay?
Yeah.
Is my potholes okay? Can you plow the roads when it snows? If you're taking care of those things, then hey, you got my vote.
Are you not raising my mill rate again and again and again and again and again?
Well, if you do raise my mill rate, explain to me why my mill rate's is going up.
Where's the taxes going?
And where the taxes going to? If the tax is going towards schools and take care of my kids' education, hey, fine, I'm for that, because you know what? If I send my kids to a Catholic school, I'm going to pay a lot more money.
Yes.
So it really depends. It really depends. People are not. I don't really think people are really against paying a little more if they actually see something coming out of their investment into the city or into the town of any municipality.
I can't help but think of the Michael Moore film, whichever country it was, where they show you where all of your taxes are going in your paycheck.
On your paycheck, that actually shows where the taxes you're paying. It breaks it down what specific line items that your taxes pay. And of course, they don't have the. He makes a good point about an important point about the fact that nothing goes toward, or a small sliver goes toward the military budget, as opposed to the United States, where almost 60% of our tax dollars go to pay for military expenditures. But on the 110th issue, I'm wondering if perhaps part of the issue there might be geographical, where we have an incumbent that's been there for a long time and certainly is going to get the support of his party unless he does something egregious. But perhaps if that was the race she was interested in running in, if that was the type of position she was looking to hold, in order to be in her district, she really couldn't run as a Democrat, because I don't think she would be, I don't think they would push Bob Godfrey aside in order to, now I'm just guessing.
Well, again, look.
In a geographical sense.
I mean, you know me very well. And you know how I started my blogging experience. My blogging experience is a great influence to me, at least in terms of blogging, was Ned Lamont.
Yep.
And I do fondly recall Ned Lamont back in late 2005, early 2006, when we first started, the resistance we received from Democratic town committees throughout the state, including this greater Danbury area. In fact, most of the people who are now in Danbury who are like, hey, yeah, Ned Lamont's great, they were vehemently against dismissing him, and a lot of pushback against him. But
in retrospect, they consider him. Oh wow, she should have won. But in the meanwhile, back then they were plugging a dude named Joe Lieberman, who had fallen completely out of favor with traditional Democratic ideals.
Well, in a sense, yes, but he got even way off the rails after 2006. But there was a lot of progressives, so-called progressives, A lot of, I should just call them Democrats because they're not progressive at all. And in fact, there's not, in many ways, there's not much of a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Certainly. They're all the same. But, you know, again, but he fought hard. He stayed on message. And in that hot day in August, he beat Joe Lieberman in the primary. And that changed everything. That allowed it so that if candidates were comfortable to criticize the war, and it made a great change. So I don't really believe in you jumping ship and going to another political party in order to push out an incumbent. If you feel that that incumbent is not representing your best interests, you primary that person. And you fight as hard as you can, and you give it the college try.
Yep.
And you just don't do it during the campaign season. You do it throughout his entire term. You pop him his entire term, call him out his entire term. Chris Dodd, who's another individual who nobody thought he would ever be untouchable. He was untouchable. You know, the Tea Party fringe, you know, if you like them or you don't like them, they were very effective in pushing Chris Dodd right out of office. And that was before he even announced that he was going to run again for re-election. They just constant hit him on the mortgage issue and a whole variety of other issues, for better or if it's right or wrong. But the point is that he was pushed out.
I'm not going to speak to that being pretty much a non-issue because he got a very small break from a lender.
You know, it's that, about, but again, still,
a lot was made of. A
lot was made of, but what was the end result? The end result is that Chris Dodd is no longer here. Now we have Richard Blumenthal and Chris Murphy, and I think that's actually, in my opinion, a good trade-off. You know, Chris Murphy was an amazing congressman, and I think he's an amazing senator, as well as Richard Blumenthal. But, you know, just because somebody's in term for a long period of time, that should not discourage you from taking somebody, challenging an individual. Bob Godfrey, for the most part, in all due respect to Bob Godfrey, I know him very well, and this might sting a little bit, but Bob Godfrey, his challenges for the last at least I've been following Danbury politics for at least, you know, since the last 10 years. Every one of his challengers were just, in my opinion, placeholders. You know, Danbury Republicans have a long history of just, you know, making sure they don't have make sure they have a full slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, quote unquote full slate, which I don't really believe in full slates, because you can have a full slate, you have a full slate full of incompetents who are just basically placeholders.
Yeah. Who
don't do anything. And that's, I think, for at least in the last 10 years that I've watched Bob, you know, he's had a lot of candidates who were just not up to snuff. Had no experience whatsoever and weren't really qualified to run in the first place. I think Emanuela Palmer is a real challenge to Bob Godfrey, and I think Bob should, you know, if he's watching or he sees it, he really should take that race seriously, because there's a lot of criticism towards State Rep Godfrey that they don't think he's representing the district. They think he represents more of Hartford than downtown Danbury. They don't see Bob around a lot in the downtown area, or do much of anything for downtown Danbury. And especially for the immigrant population. And the immigrants population, a majority of them live in the 1/10, which is downtown Danbury. And a lot of them are registering to vote because of the Donald Trump fiasco. There's an article in the News Times talking about a lot of people who are going down to the Hispanic Center registering to vote, who are immigrants. So that is something to keep an eye on. Most likely Bob should win, but I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't win, and I wouldn't be shocked if his margin of victory is under 500 votes, which would be a wake-up. It should be a wake-up call to show that, hey, you are not invulnerable, and if you win this cycle, there's a really good chance you definitely will not win the next cycle, especially if Hillary Clinton wins the presidency, and her midterm election would be 2 years from now, which is usually goes against incumbents.
Yeah. Well, it certainly this certainly speaks well to say that, as you say, that Bob Godfrey may not win by a lot, and sometimes that's a good wake-up call for a candidate if they don't win by a lot. That maybe they need to go back and revisit the reason why they didn't do so well in an election, and learn some lessons. And I think you pointed to the immigrant constituency and them not being served or being served. And that's an important thing to consider.
And it's important, as well as the fact that a lot of people feel that Bob Godfrey's not representing downtown Danbury. And I think there's a case to be made that Bob Godfrey's not representing downtown Danbury. And I'll talk about that in my future post on my site. But, there is a legitimate there's a lot of interest in the 110.
Oh, by the way, is that Hat City Blog now, or is it? Did you move to another site?
No, it's still Hat City Blog.
Okay.
I've been converting my website from one media platform to the other.
But it's still Hat City Blog.
Hat City Blog, and I also do online commentary on the News Times website as well. So
Yes.
you can catch me there. You'll be able to read my stuff, and trust me, everybody's reading me. But I do think that the 110s is somewhat in play. I think that Emmanuel she's articulate, she's smart, she's bright. We interviewed her, like I said before. I think that she has a chance to shock things. I don't know if she has enough to win. I don't know if she has enough political experience, but she is out there trying hard, and I give her a lot of credit for doing that. And again, I think State Representative Godfrey would be very wise to put on a new pair of sneakers and get out there and bang some doors and really make the case hard, as opposed to doing what he does every political cycle, because I think this cycle is much different from the other cycles. And I think Emanuela, especially within the next 3 to 4 weeks, if she can make a case and really go after Godfrey, saying that he's not representing downtown, that he doesn't care about the immigrant population, he's not there in terms of education, and he cares more about Hartford and how he stands in terms of statue at the state capitol and hanging out with Dan Malloy, especially linking Godfrey with Dan Malloy. It could be a problem. It'd be interesting to watch. It'd be interesting to see.
So a question for you then, if the local immigrant population is getting out and registering because of Trump, then presumably they're registering because they want to be able to vote for Clinton in terms of the general election. And exactly what we're talking about not voting a party line. It'll be very interesting to see down the line in that, where Godfrey being the Democrat, it'll be interesting to see how that turnover is and vote tallies are given that effect, because you've got that complete reverse situation.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to immigrant population, I think they don't vote. They wouldn't vote party line. I can't see them voting party line. They're not into this. It's not like they grew up into this political nonsense where we had the old voting levers and all that stuff.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
you don't have that type of that background, and when you look and you see these people coming down, you go down the list. All right, I'm not voting Trump because he's bad. You see Godfrey, and it's like, wait a second. Emmanuel told me that this person did this person did that. I'm not voting for this person because this person's just as bad as Trump. Yeah. I wouldn't. It'll be very interesting. I don't know how many votes we're talking about in terms of the immigrant population. This is all new territory right now. Right. But she is out there, and if you look at her lawn signs, there's a lot of her lawn signs that says Democrats for Emanuela Palmeras, and you see them around there, and every time you see one, it's like, wow, that's a vote away from Godfrey. It's something to be concerned about especially when we have a long-term incumbent who does the same old thing year after year after cycle, and it works because he just had nothing but placeholders against him.
And Connecticut has, and I don't know what the statistics are against other states, but Connecticut feels like it has. There's almost a stronger incumbency than in many other places. Like the turnover here, I think if one were to go look at it, it's just an assumption, is much lower in the state of Connecticut than as you branch out from here. And I love the idea of the fact that going down the line, looking at Godfrey, what Emanuela says, in some way it's really forcing a more knowledgeable and educated voter. And in some way having folks crossing the party lines. I think the idea of Democrats and Republicans is going away anyway. It's really falling by the wayside. But I love watching it break down in some way, seeing that folks have to be educated to know what's going on.
Especially on the local level, not quite much on this U.S. Senate or the congressional level, but especially on the local level, because these individuals, these people, they live down the street. They're like these state reps. They're basically neighborhood representatives. And again, the 110, it's a lot different because you have a certain segment who knows, hey, look, this guy voted against me. He's never been around during anything that had pertained to immigrants. Where was he during the Danbury 11 case? Where was he during nice access? He's never been around, and it could mean something to some people. And then through another segment of the downtown, people like, look, downtown, we're trying to revitalize it. Where's this guy? He's not helping us out. Where's our tax dollars coming back in to help downtown Danbury and Main Street? Where's he at? those little things could make a difference. But to your point about people not in Connecticut not voting people out, Danbury is known as the state of steady habits. And unless you do something really, really crazy, you're pretty much in there. Mayor Boughton's been in for a long period of time. Before that was Mayor Eriquez, and then Mayor Dyer in the city of Danbury. We've had long-term mayors for a majority of the time. They get once people get comfortable with somebody, say, hey, you're paving my roads, my school's okay. All right, we'll vote you in.
Okay, speaking of constituent work, I know you've known Bob Godfrey for a long time. Tell us about some of the things that he's done over the years that you think are very positive.
Well, I think there's several things about Bob Godfrey that's great. He is the deputy speaker, and a deputy speaker has a certain amount of clout. And just by that alone, he does a lot of great things for Danbury because he's from Danbury. He's the deputy speaker of the House of Representatives. That is a huge thing. And his last election, he won by over 1,000 votes. That means something. I think he's a long-term Danburian, lifelong person in Danbury. He has a long history, and people know him. And I think that means that goes a long way of doing great things for Danbury. I think some of his problems is that a lot of people feel that he's not representing the 1/10. Maybe he's well known in Danbury, but what about his area that he represents? And they don't see. You need to see progress. You need to see something concrete that you have done, and I don't think a lot of people are seeing that right now, at least from my feedback. And we'll see how it translates in the election. I don't know yet, but it'll be very interesting to see. Out of all the races, that's the one I would watch.
We're going to come back. Thank you. We're going to come back and we're going to do a second show and continue the conversation. That'll be aired tomorrow, Thursday at noon 30. It's Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson, co-host Marc Moorash, and good friend Al Robinson, who's always willing to stand on principle rather than on party lines, and I think that's something to be said for that. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And we shall continue in just a minute, or tomorrow, if that's how you want to look at it. Thanks for watching Progressive Soup.